Okay, the urinary system, pretty straightforward. Um, Really only three major organs, right? Your two kidneys and your bladder. Again, that's your two kidneys, one, two, and your bladder. You saw the kidneys in the turtle. It's pretty clear, and a lot of you saw the bladder as well. Now, as part of the tubes, again, we have tubes. There's more of these tubes inside tubes, right? Let's walk through what happens with the urinary system. One really good important point is this is the waste management system of your body. So again, this is waste management. Now, we talked about in the digestive system, your rectum collecting what your body could not process. That is not waste from inside your body. Remember, that's the stuff that we could not digest. Yes, it's waste in the sense that it's waste that we could not digest, but that's not the waste from your body. The urinary system takes care of the waste from inside your body. Now, another kind of caveat or kind of a side point here is that carbon dioxide, and we'll talk about that when we talk about respiration, is part of the waste that's being produced by your body. It's kind of the leftovers after you break down sugar, and we'll talk more about that later. That goes out in your respiratory system. But the major waste of your body is taken care of by the urinary system. Now, the question is, how does this waste taken care of by the urinary system? Well, obviously, all the tissues of your body put the waste inside these blood vessels. And from the abdomen, from the aorta, that comes from the top of your body, comes the abdominal aorta. And then, of course, you have your inferior vena cava. Remember, the blood going away from the heart, so the blood's coming down this way, and it breaks off into the renal arteries. There's two of them. There's the right and left renal arteries. You don't have to know the names of all these names, okay? I don't need you to know all these names. What I need you to know, structure-wise on the test, kidneys, bladder, urethra, ureter. There's two ureters, one coming from each of the kidneys that feed into the urethra, and then feed into the bladder, and then from the bladder you have one urethra. Now the urethra goes out. You see here is a small picture, whether it's through a penis or a vagina, either way the urethra goes out of the body, and that's where the urine comes out of. So it's the same structure in both males and females. Now, what's interesting is that where that waste comes from and where it goes. Now, what happens is the blood, now comes the function part that you have to know about the urinary system. So the structural part, two kidneys, one bladder, two ureters, one urethra. That you should know. Now, the other part of that you need to understand is when the blood is coming down, because remember, the blood is going to have a lot of waste in it at this point. And the function of these kidneys is to filter out that waste. So in goes the blood through these renal arteries into these two kidneys, and these kidneys act as filters. They use salt concentration gradients, which you haven't learned about yet, but it uses these concentration gradients to kind of allow the waste to go into this what's called the renal pelvis, all right, this kind of area here. But we don't, that part is not necessary for you to know. Just know that the blood is filtered out. All the waste goes into this tube that we call the ureter. Okay, goes into this tube. The blood then recirculates back into the veins. So there's still still closed circulatory system, but through these membranes, the waste comes out. Salt, urea, and water. Our bodies are not the best at preserving water. So our bodies aren't the best because we need to use that water to kind of filter out the waste. And again, mostly that's urea. We get that urea mixed with some water, and it starts to collect in the bladder. As the bladder fills up, the muscles in the bladder start to squeeze. You start getting a feeling. Of course, there's nerves running throughout this entire system. The your brain says, hold it. There's some muscles here that kind of hold closed. There's a sphincter that holds closed the urine. So it allows you to hold it for a while. You don't want to hold your urine for too long. And then you go to the restroom, and of course you relax that muscle, and the urine comes from the bladder out the urethra, and hopefully into a toilet somewhere. So the urine is actually originates in your bloodstream. Was produced by the cells and all the tissue surrounding from all the blood. Remember the circulatory system? You looked at all those blood vessels, all that went to all the tissues of your body, and all that urea that they produced went into your blood. That blood was circulated into these kidneys. It's filtered out in through these tubes, through these kidneys. They get filtered. The liquid that goes in through these ureters contain urea, water, some salt. They should not have sugar. And when we cover diabetes, you'll see that some people with diabetes have high blood sugar. You'll get some sugar in here as well. This urine that's in your bladder should not have any bacteria. Now think about it. This is where this is so key. It links kind of all 3 or 4 of the systems together. We talked about the respiratory system and the digestive systems as being tubes within a tube, and that as you absorb things into your body, the stuff that was inside that inner tube was still outside your body. Same thing with the trachea. As you breathed in the oxygen, the stuff that was in that lumen of the air sacs, that space in the air sacs, was still outside your body until it was absorbed into your bloodstream. Now this stuff is all inside your blood, and now it's going out of your body. So you see, there should be absolutely no bacteria or viruses. Unless you're sick, there should be no bacteria or viruses in this urine. It should be fairly sterile. And the urine itself is a poison, so not a lot of things can live in that urine. When you have a UTI, which is called, if you ever get a UTI, it's a urinary tract infection. And what that means is you had to have bacteria travel up your urethra, and then that bacteria then could move up in the ureter and maybe get as far as your kidneys. It's a pretty bad infection if it gets up into your kidneys. Usually UTI stays in the urethra, maybe gets up in the ureter, and of course it could fill up the bladder with bacteria. But it's pretty tough to get an infection that's high up in the urinary system. Usually urethra is what's involved in a UTI. All right, so just kind of a general overview of what the urinary system is. Again, structurally, 2 kidneys, 1 bladder, 2 ureters, 1 urethra. That's for males and females. Functionally, the blood brings the waste from the body into the 2 kidneys. I'm not even going to ask you about the renal arteries. I should, but I won't. I will ask you what the kidneys do, and they filter the blood. And what do the ureters do? They carry the urine to the bladder. What does the bladder do? It holds the urine, collects and holds the urine until you have an opportune time to get rid of the waste. And then what does the urethra do? It allows for that urine to get out of the body. All right, so that's really kind of simple, fairly simple system, the urinary system, but it's incredibly important. All right, hope that explained everything about the urinary system.